Hey, what's up guys? It's Gage, aka Sammy with the Battle Boys. If you saw our video last week, the top 10 strongest mutants in all of the Marvel Universe, you would have heard me mention that this week we plan to do the top 10 most powerful magic users in all of Marvel. And that was the plan up until a few days ago. We had some audio issues, and unfortunately that means it is going to take us a little bit longer to get that video out, but we didn't want to leave you guys without a video this week, so instead we're going to cover the top 10 most powerful versions of Spider-Man. Now, this won't be limited to just versions of Peter Parker, but it will be limited to characters that have been bit by the spider. So we won't be including any of the numerous clones that we've seen of Spider-Man throughout his history. So that does mean that Kane Parker and Ben Reilly are both disqualified from the list, though they definitely would be strong enough to make it onto the list if they did qualify. And also, just for the sake of spicing up the list, we're not going to include base 616 Peter. We will include versions of 616 Peter, but we did want to limit it to just 2 versions. Otherwise, this list would be mostly populated by different versions of him. And with that being said, we can roll on into the honorable mentions. First with Spinneret/Spider-Woman. Now this is a version of Mary Jane, who's from Earth 18119, and she wears a suit that was reverse engineered to give her Peter's spider powers. And she also later gains the Venom symbiote, so she would be incredibly powerful, but I wouldn't say she's necessarily a version of Spider-Man. Another character that was just short of making the list is Goblin, the version of Peter Parker from Earth 21205. Now this is a version of Peter who basically just went crazy after Gwen Stacy's death. And his only real feat we know of is killing the entirety of Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery. We don't know who that includes or excludes. And he does have the gear of Green Goblin, though he doesn't have enough raw feats to be considered for the list proper. And the last of our 3 honorable mentions is the Spider from Earth 15. Now this is a version of Peter Parker who became a villain after being possessed by the Carnage symbiote, but it's once again a lack of feats that's keeping him off of the list, though the implied power of having the Carnage symbiote attached to him would definitely be enough to make the list. But it's also worth noting important and popular characters like Spider-Punk and Spidey UK, who also suffer from a lack of feats, so you won't be seeing them on the list. And starting off our list with number 10, we have Cindy Moon, otherwise known as Silk. Now she's definitely not up to par with standard 616 Spider-Man, though she can harm him in combat. She's also at the level where she can fight low-level gamma beings, which is the subspecies of human that Hulk is. She's also able to dominate other low-level superhumans without really much of a problem. However, her strength is definitely seen, like I said, as lesser than 616 Peter, but it should be noted that this was increased later on with her exposure to the Goblin Serum. It is also stated, though, by Peter himself that Cindy is superior to him in terms of raw speed, and this was to the point that he couldn't even avoid her even with his Spidey sense. He even notes that she can swing faster than he can. Now, this doesn't mean that she can necessarily just dance around Spider-Man in terms of speed, but the fact that there is a noticeable difference is definitely noteworthy. Her durability, though, is definitely admittedly lacking. She's been knocked out by attacks that most versions of Spider-Man could probably just shrug off, so showing once again an inferiority in a certain area to the standard 616 Peter. It should be noted also that her webbing is capable of insulating Electro, but it can be burnt through with a sufficient amount of heat. It's also capable of restraining other low-level spiders like Spidey Noir, and moving away from the main 616 timeline for the next entry, which is number 9, Spider-Woman, also known as SpiderGwen, Ghost Spider, Venom, Gwenom. She does have a bit of a complicated continuity as well. Her powers have changed a lot over time along with her name, but despite all the changes made to her continuity, it is fairly easy to explain it. Obviously, she started out with the normal spider powers given by the bite from the radioactive spider. She was later depowered, but then was able to use an unsteady spider isotope to grow back to the relative levels of her original form. She was then later bonded to the Venom symbiote, which honestly is where she gets her best feats. And then moving on to her more current form, where she was possessed by Kindred. But after that, she seems to have reverted back to her original spider power set. And with this standard power set, she actually, unlike Silk, does seem to be among the top tier in terms of spiders. Even in her base form, she's at a level of strength where she can beat down and even knock out the Earth 65 version of Rhino. Also, like most other spiders, she's consistently above other low-level superhumans. Can even overpower a life model decoy version of 616 Lizard, who contends with Spider-Man pretty regularly, and even overpowers him sometimes. She's able to do the same to 616 Norman Osborn, and can even battle 616 Peter himself and Carnage. So now we're getting to the point where people can truly contend with 616 Peter, though I wouldn't say that SpiderGwen is quite on his level. Though she definitely does have pretty impressive durability feats. She's tanked attacks from an alternate version of Kane Parker, who, like I said, would have made the list if he qualified. Has also tanked hits from Morlun, who's an inheritor, who runs through low-level spider totems like they're nothing. She's even able to tank a blast from an Iron Man repulsor gauntlet wielded by the Punisher. Her durability definitely does have its limits. She has been knocked out by alternate versions of Electro, but her strongest showings can contend with a good majority of the lower mid-tiers in Marvel. Her speed is also definitely impressive. I wouldn't say it's quite on the level of our last entry, Cindy Moon, but she is able to save people from multiple gas explosions at once, and has the same general feats of spider sense that are expected from prominent spider totems. Her webbing can also contain the same attacks from Electro that knocked her out previously, and they can even clog the same Iron Man repulsors that I mentioned she tanked earlier. So her webbing can definitely make up for any perceived lack of durability that comes from her Electro showings, but I believe the durability feats that I've presented definitely counteract that low showing. Additionally, if we do include her Venom abilities in this entry, she has invisibility and shapeshifting that includes flight, the ability to make oxygen masks, and obviously shapeshift her hands into bladed weaponry. We can also expect the usual symbiote regeneration. And moving from one Into the Spider-Verse main character to another, we have our number 8, Miles Morales, the second Spider-Man of the Ultimate Universe. Now, he's one of the only characters on this list who has actually operated as Spider-Man within the main 616 continuity, and at this point he does have enough experience to where he can keep up with Peter in combat. He's even held back the Spider Armor's Waldos, which are stronger than Peter himself, and has been able to one-shot ultimate versions of Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery, even knocking out 616 Tombstone, something that Peter struggles to do. And perhaps one of his most impressive feats is destroying an alternate version of Captain America's shield. And one thing that places him above other Spider-Men on this list is his Venom Blast. It's probably some of the highest output that we'll see on this list. It can shred through webbing, even knock out a standard 616 Peter, which is the first time we've seen somebody be able to do that on this list. Even knock out 616 Rhino, 616 Venom. And these are two characters who are both above Peter in terms of strength and durability. It can even stun the likes of Morlun and Inheritor, who I mentioned destroys Spider-Man on the regular. It even has other high-level borderline outlier feats like harming Null's Avatar, knocking out Blackheart and Fin Fang Foom. I'm hesitant to say that these feats should be used as a standard for Miles' Venom Blast, as Null is weak to electricity. But this is just to show that his Venom Blast is currently being portrayed as a top-tier attack in terms of all of Marvel Earth, considering who he has harmed with it in recent years. And Miles also exclusively has invisibility that can hide even from the likes of Thanos and Maker. He also comes with his own impressive durability feats, having tanked hits from basically the entirety of 616 Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery, even the likes of Regent, and as I mentioned, Inheritors like Morlun. He also scales above the likes of Ultimate Peter Parker in terms of durability and strength, and has even been able to tank his own Venom Blast. So we're definitely getting into the upper echelon of Spider-Men. And we continue that trend with our number 7s, which is Miguel OHara, Spider-Man 2099. Now this is another character with a complicated history like SpiderGwen and Silk, but his are more in terms of retcons. He's had one big retcon to his history, but these two versions are essentially acknowledged as the same character by Marvel, so this detail definitely isn't the most important thing to delve into. But in both versions, he is able to battle with 616 Peter, and he has even defeated robots that were giving him a lot of trouble. He can also obviously rip apart tanks, and has claws that slice through symbiote tendrils. But a lot of his best feats are in durability. He's been able to tank attacks from Superior Spider-Man, which is when Doc Ock was in Peter Parker's body, and this was a version of Spider-Man that is noted not to hold back. Not only this, but he later gets an upgraded Parker Industries model of his suit, made of an unstable molecule that's mixed with Kevlar. And it can outright no-cell tank shells, 29-9 plasma rifles that disintegrate people, and were noted to have been used on the Hulk in the past. He's even tanked attacks from Dr. Kronos, who has taught the likes of Dr. Doom about robotics. His piercing durability is also equally insane. He was able to no-cell Elektra's size, and these have pierced gamma beings like Red Hulk, Red She-Hulk, and even Hulk himself. Red Hulk even wonders if they're made of adamantium. Now this doesn't necessarily confirm that they are, but the fact that they were thought to be made of the hardest substance in all of Marvel, along with the fact that Miguel's armor is able to completely no-cell it, does kind of show how impressive his durability is. He also has a holographic AI system within his suit. Similar to Jarvis in the MCU, she's called Lyra. He can still use her even when she's in different timelines. She possesses nanosecond timing, and can even create holograms to the point of spawning hundreds of clones. His suit also possesses thrusters to the point that he can fly, spider tracers from Parker Industries, which were noted to be on par or superior to the Bleeding Edge era of Iron Man's technology, and he even has spider saucers that can blow up futuristic unmanned Iron Man suits. These likely aren't on the level of a regular Iron Man suit, but he was able to blow them completely to pieces. And though it isn't necessarily indicative of his strength, I still want to note that Miguel OHara is worthy of wielding Mjolnir, but the very fact that he's on such an exclusive list really shows how Miguel is portrayed, along with the insane feats that I've already listed. Now this would be the point in the list where 616 Spider-Man would likely go, but as I said, we did want to exclude him just to spice up the list a little bit. So instead, at number 6, we'll be getting to a point where these characters are stronger than the standard Spider-Man that we know of. And starting with that part of the list, as I said, number 6, we have SpiderHulk. Now, there have been a few times in Peter's continuity that he has possessed the powers of the Hulk, but most prominently, it recently happened in the Immortal Hulk run. Now, assuming he possesses all of the abilities of the Hulk, including his healing factor, gamma-based abilities, he'd be insanely powerful, and definitely above standard Peter. However, he definitely doesn't seem to be on the level of standard Hulk's own strength, as he was seen on the losing end of a slugfest with the Thing, though he definitely did far better in a fight with the Thing than anybody below him on the list would. He was able to brawl with a ridiculously nerfed version of Immortal Hulk, which definitely shows an advantage over very, very low-level Gamma beings, though he was eventually defeated by Bruce Banner's nerfed Hulk due to Bruce's experience with the form, and he absorbed the Hulk itself out of Peter. But despite his lack of showings, this is definitely a form of Peter that would be way above anybody we've listed in terms of raw power. Moving on to the top 5 most powerful versions of Spider-Man, we open up with the Amazing Spider, later known as Ghost Spider, and then even later known as Spirit Spider. Now, this is a Spider-Man from a reality where Uncle Ben never died, and Peter Parker became a business mogul Parker Industries style. Now, the insane statements attached to this character would imply his placement higher on this list. For example, he somehow defeated Annihilus, Thanos, and Galactus, according to Rhino, and he accomplished this by absorbing the life essence of spider totems throughout the multiverse. Similar to the Inheritors, though, he would search the multiverse and teleport alternate Spider-Man into his timeline. And even in his weakened state at the start of the story, he was able to nearly one-shot 616 Peter casually. However, due to a shenanigan, he was killed by Uncle Ben in the struggle against 616 Peter once he found out how the Amazing Spider got his power. He was eventually sent to Mephisto's realm after his death, where he became a Ghost Rider. And as I mentioned, the character has a lot of statements implying top-tier power, and this would put him way higher on the list. But this was accomplished completely off-screen and thanks to entirely external amps. But his ability to dominate 616 Peter, plus all the abilities associated with being a spirit of vengeance, like Hellfire and the Penance Stare, would definitely put him comfortably in the top 5. And moving down the list with number 4, we have Takuya Yamashita. Now, I definitely butchered that, but this is the Japanese Spider-Man, and he's armed with a giant mech called Leopardon. And this is a massive multi-story robot who possesses both autonomy and a personality of his own. Now, the physical prowess of this version of Spider-Man is definitely lacking, but he does possess all of the abilities expected of a spider totem, such as spider sense and web shooters, but his real power comes from the tech that he wields. Now, his spacecraft, the Marveler, is able to destroy buildings, dust massive kaiju, and is what transforms into his giant mech. Now, when it transforms into the mech, it possesses a sword capable of disintegrating multi-story kaiju, and it was even capable of battling Solus, who's the strongest of the Inheritors, while he was amped by the Enigma Force of Cosmic Spider-Man. And despite the mech losing this fight, it was able to drain the cosmic amp from Solus as a result. And there are direct statements showing that this mech makes this version of Spider-Man the second strongest in all of Spider-Verse. It should even be noted that the sword wielded by this mech was capable of killing Solus outright, but this is only when it was wielded by Captain Universe Miles Morales. And with that, we move on to the top 3. And obviously, starting with number 3, we have Parker Industries' Peter Parker from the 616 timeline. Now, this is from the latter part of the Dan Slott run, and he possesses a suit made of a similar neurokinetic nanotech as Tony Stark's Bleeding Edge armor. And as I said in the 2099 entry, he's even implied to have superior technology to that of Tony Stark himself. This includes an electric discharge that can knock out Morgan Le Fay and upgraded web shooters. And as I mentioned, he also built the Spider-Man 2099's upgraded suit, which is what makes him so durable. And as I mentioned, he does also have an upgraded formula to his webbing, which can bring hypersonic characters to a standstill, even able to protect from blasts from Iron Man and even a bloodlusted Human Torch, who has some of the hottest flames in probably all of fiction. He even adds versatility with new types of webbing like sonic disruptors, acid, ice, and most importantly, Z-metal. Now, this is an unexplained webbing that can absorb and redirect energy. It can also completely neutralize entirely foreign tech and block impulses going to the brain. And his Mark IV upgraded suit also grants him insane durability above the likes of most Iron Man suits. He can also take attacks from the Regent. This is a character who had just absorbed the power of an entire Avengers roster, including Thor and Hyperion. And this suit can even tank attacks that shattered vibranium shields. And perhaps his most impressive calculable feat is tanking a blast that was powered by a device requiring at least an exajoule of power. Now, to put this into perspective, this is 5 times the yield of the largest nuclear weapon ever made. So at this point, we're getting to insane, even cosmic levels of durability. He's also capable of tanking Thor's lightning, though the extent with which this suit amps Peter's strength is fairly inconsistent in my opinion, but his ridiculous durability along with his utility definitely put him comfortably in the top 3. And moving on to number 2, we have a version of Peter Parker who has technically existed in the main 616 continuity, but there are several versions. And that choice will be Captain Universe, also known as Cosmic Spider-Man. Now, as I mentioned, he does have multiple versions, but we will be kind of packaging every version into one for this entry. We have covered this version of Spider-Man in our previous top 10 most powerful what-if characters list, Definitely go check that out if you haven't seen it. But to summarize, this is a version of Spider-Man with near endless cosmic power. He can knock around the likes of Thor, Grey Hulk, Quasar, and he's even defeated a version of Nebula that was powered by a near infinite energy source. And this version of Nebula was an opponent that would have taken the Avengers hours to defeat. He's also capable of manipulating both organic and inorganic matter on the subatomic level. And this is to the point of being able to transform his webbing into adamantium, which is one of the hardest substances in all of the Marvel Universe. And he obviously has other essential cosmic abilities like faster-than-light flight, and his senses and energy projection are of a cosmic level as well. His energy attacks are even capable of flooring the likes of Thor and one-shotting Graviton. And this is while Graviton was applying the gravity equal to the Earth's core to Peter. But he casually no-sold this and KO'd Graviton with one hit. Now, this is a character that is often seen as the undisputed peak of Spider-Man lore, at least when it comes to power. But we do believe that there is a version of Spider-Man that is above him and the entire list by an unbelievable margin. So our number one most powerful version of Spider-Man is, once again, the 616 version of Peter with the Beyonder's power. Now, this is from a series called Spider-Man Secret Wars, and as implied by the title of this entry, he wields the power of the Beyonder. Now, this is a multiversal plus character, and this was shown when Peter, with his power, was able to manipulate and recreate the entirety of what is called creation. I don't know if that implies the entire multiverse or the universe, though with the Beyonder's power, he would be able to perform either feat pretty casually. On top of this, he was able to stomp a laundry list of villains, including Galactus, Molecule Man, and Ultron. I mean, there isn't much to this entry. He's literally just Peter Parker with the Beyonder's power. And the feats really speak for themselves. He was without a doubt the most powerful being in all of the 616 continuity, and one of those powerful beings in the entire multiverse when he was wielding this power. So without a doubt, there is no other version of Peter Parker that even has a chance of standing up to this one. But yeah, that's our list for this week. Do you think that we missed out any versions of Peter? I mean, he has an 80+ year continuity, so there's no doubt that we missed at least one. Comment how you would have ordered the list down below. Make sure to share and like this video. Make sure to follow us on all other platforms. We just hit 900 followers on TikTok. And we'll be at Big Battle Boys on there, as well as Instagram, Twitter, and eventually we'll get our Twitch channel up. And once again, remember to look out next week for our top 10 most powerful magic users in all of Marvel. And don't forget to comment topics that you want to see down below. But until then, thanks for watching, guys.